You know exactly when to nod. You have learned it so well you barely notice you do it anymore. The slight lean forward, the intake of breath at the right moment, the specific sound, not quite a word, that communicates you are tracking the thing everyone else is tracking. And then the nod, just big enough to register, just timed well enough to pass. You've been doing this for years. In living rooms, in workplaces, at family gatherings, in bars where the television is on, and the game is what everyone came to watch. And you are very good at it. Good enough that most people in most rooms have no idea they are watching a performance. But you know because underneath the nod is a specific exhaustion that comes from doing this over and over for years. Not the exhaustion of being somewhere you do not want to be. The exhaustion of performing interests you do not feel, in front of people whose interest is completely real, in a setting where your lack of interest is somehow the most unusual thing in the room. The room is full of genuine feeling, and yours stays exactly where it was. That gap between the room's feeling and yours is what this video is about, not the sport, not the teams, not whether you should try harder to care or find a way in. The gap itself, what it actually is, where it comes from, and what it tells you about the specific way your brain is wired. Because here is what I want to say before anything else. You are not broken. You are not cold. You are not missing a social chip that everyone else was issued at birth. What you have is a different brain architecture, a different reward system, a different channel your nervous system uses to bond with the world. And once you understand what that channel actually is, the nod becomes something different, not a performance, a signal. The signal of a brain that is looking for something real in a room that is not offering it. There's a reason your brain does not catch the signal, and that reason changes a lot about how you understand yourself. Stay with me. The asymmetry nobody questions. Here is something that almost nobody names out loud, even though you have felt it your entire life. Sports is one of the only interests in modern life that operates as an assumed default, not a preference, not a hobby, a baseline, a social expectation so deeply built into the fabric of everyday life that its absence requires explanation in a way that its presence never does. Think about how that works in practice. Nobody asks the sports fan where their interest comes from. Nobody pulls them aside and says, "You seem really into this. Can you explain it?" Nobody treats their enthusiasm as something unusual, something that needs accounting for, something outside the normal range of human experience. Their interest is simply assumed. It is what normal, engaged, socially functional adults do. But yours, the absence of that interest, is treated as a gap. People ask you why you do not follow it. They try to find you a team. They assume you just have not found the right sport yet, the right angle, the right match that will finally hook you in, as if the problem is that you have not yet encountered the correct version of the thing, rather than that the thing itself simply does not land. And you have spent years either explaining this, reaching for some version of "I just do not find it interesting" that never quite satisfies, or quietly avoiding the explanation entirely, because the person asking does not really accept the explanation. To them, it is as strange as saying you do not find breathing particularly compelling. The thing is so fundamental to their experience that your absence from it reads as something missing in you. You have probably absorbed some version of that reading, some low-level belief that the gap is yours to close, that if you just tried harder or cared more or found the right entry point, you would eventually arrive where everyone else already is. Here's the truth about that gap. It is not a measure of what is missing in you. It is a measure of something very specific that sports does inside the brains that respond to it, and the fact that those specific mechanisms fire differently in yours. And here is what that asymmetry is actually measuring, not a deficiency, a different architecture. What sports actually does to the brains that love it. To understand why sports does not land for you, you first have to understand why it lands so completely for the people it reaches. Because it is not really about sport, not at the level of the brain. At the level of the brain, sports fandom is about something much older and much more fundamental. It is about survival. Your ancestors spent hundreds of thousands of years in small groups where belonging to the group was the difference between life and death. The people who survived were the ones whose brains were wired to feel the group's wins and losses as their own, to experience collective defeat as a real threat, to feel the rush of collective victory as genuine safety. The brain circuits that handle all of this, the ones that produce the feeling of shared identity, of being on the same side, of winning and losing together, are some of the oldest and most powerful circuits in the human nervous system. Sports activates every single one of them. The shared uniform, the team name, the enemy on the other side, the experience of the same moment happening to a room full of people at exactly the same time. All of it fires the survival circuits. The brain releases a bonding chemical, the same one that surges when you hold a baby or hug someone you love, because the game has triggered the ancient signal that says, your group is here, you are safe, you belong. And then there is the unpredictability. The outcome of a game is genuinely unknown, and unpredictable outcomes are one of the most powerful hooks the brain has. When you cannot predict a reward, your brain cannot switch off its attention to it. Every game is, in chemical terms, a system designed to keep the brain hooked, not by manipulation, but by genuinely delivering the most powerful social and emotional chemicals the human brain produces: belonging, anticipation, collective joy, collective grief, all in 2 hours on a schedule with people you love around you. This is real. This is not trivial. For the brains it reaches, sports fandom is one of the most efficient delivery systems for the things human beings need most. The people around you are not performing. Their brains are doing something genuine. And understanding that is important. Not because it should make you feel worse about what you do not feel, but because it makes the next question more interesting. If that circuit is real and powerful, why does your brain not run it? The answer is specific, and it is not a deficiency. A different frequency. Your brain is not running a broken version of the sports circuit. It is running a completely different one. Here is the simplest way to understand it. Some brains find their strongest reward in things that come from outside. Wins, scores, rankings, results measured against others, unpredictable outcomes, the collective electricity of a shared moment with a clear result. These brains are driven by external events, and sports is perfectly designed to deliver exactly what they're looking for. Other brains find their strongest reward in things that come from inside, understanding something fully, making something, following an idea as it opens into a larger idea, the slow, specific feeling of getting better at something that matters to you, the connection that forms between two people who are genuinely curious about the same thing. These brains are driven internally, by depth, by mastery, by meaning, and the sports system is simply not built for them, not because it is beneath them, because it is the wrong frequency. The signal is real and strong. It is just broadcasting on a channel their nervous system is not tuned to receive. Pay attention to this, because it tells you something important about how you connect with other people too. You do not form your deepest connections around shared events. You form them around shared meaning. A conversation that goes somewhere neither of you expected. A question that opens into a longer question. Two people discovering they are curious about the same strange thing for the same internal reasons. This kind of connection is slower to find. It does not generate in loud rooms around group moments. It requires something quieter and more specific. Your brain is not avoiding connection. It is looking for it in a place that sports, by design, does not provide. But here is the part one wants you to sit with, because it is the part nobody talks about when they talk about this. The social cost. There is something specific about not caring about sports that is very different from not caring about most things. Most interests are optional. You cannot care about wine or true crime podcasts or gardening, and nobody notices. Nobody uses your absence of interest in those things as a test of your social fitness. Nobody builds a Monday morning ritual around them that you have to walk past quietly. Sports is different. It is, in many environments, the primary bonding language, especially for men, the mechanism through which strangers become less strange, the common ground that gets established in the first 5 minutes of a new job, a new team, a new relationship, the thing that fills the silence between two people who do not yet know each other well enough to fill it with anything else. When you do not speak that language, you are not simply indifferent to a game. You are cut off from one of the most widely available on-ramps to social connection that exists. You have felt this in specific moments, not in a general way, in very specific ones. The Monday morning when the game was all anyone talked about and you had nothing to offer, not because you are not interesting, but because the conversation was running on a track you could not access. You got your coffee. You smiled at the right moments. You contributed just enough to avoid being invisible. And then you sat down and the conversation continued without you the way it always does. The family gathering where the television commanded the room from the moment it was turned on, where the whole architecture of the afternoon reorganized around the match, and your presence in that room became somehow beside the point, not unwelcome, just not quite required. The group chat that runs all weekend with scores and predictions and match reports. And your contribution is always slightly off rhythm, always a beat late to something you are not quite inside of. You did not choose any of this. You did not decide to opt out of a bonding language or culture made universally available. You simply have a brain that does not receive the signal. And the cost of that, the quiet, accumulated experience of being on the outside of something you cannot enter, is real. It is not self-pity to name it. It is accurate. What you have probably done in response to that cost is learn to perform well enough to get by. The nod we started with, the timing of the right sound, the surface level participation that lets you stay in a room without anyone looking too closely. Or you have quietly stopped trying to perform and accepted a certain amount of distance as the price of not pretending. Both carry their own weight. But here's the moment I want you to think about, the relief of the one other person in the room who also does not care. You have felt this too. The moment your eyes meet someone else's across the room, full of noise and movement. The slight recognition, not spoken, not acknowledged, that you are both doing the same thing, both present, both performing just enough, both somewhere else in your heads. That moment of recognition is a specific kind of relief, not because you found someone to complain to, because you found someone whose brain runs on a similar frequency to yours. And that, when it happens, is worth a lot. It happens less often than it should, but it happens. And what your brain does when it is not performing someone else's interest, where it actually goes, is worth understanding. Where your brain actually goes. Your brain is not switched off when sport is happening around you. It is not absent. It is not blank. It is not failing to engage. It is asking a different question. The question a sports following brain asks is, who won? And the answer produces a cascade of feeling: relief, joy, disappointment, belonging, a shared story to carry into the week. The question your brain asks is, why does this matter to anyone? Not as a criticism, not from a position of superiority. As a genuine question, your brain looks at a room full of people experiencing something powerful and it wants to understand what that experience actually is. What is the need underneath it? What it says about human longing, how people build identity around shared stories and collective loss, why belonging feels the way it does, and what happens when it is absent. That is not a failure to engage with the game. It is a different form of engagement with the people watching it. More analytical, more curious, further back. And here's what comes from that question when you actually follow it. The rooms where you feel genuinely alive are quieter than stadiums, smaller. The conversations where you stop watching the clock are not about fixtures and results. They are about ideas that open into other ideas, or questions that do not have clean answers, or the specific strangeness of two people discovering they see the same thing in the same way. These moments are harder to find than a sports bar. They require more patience. They do not happen on a schedule, but when they happen, they last. The connections you have made that actually mean something to you probably did not start with a shared team allegiance. They started with something stranger and slower and more specific. A conversation that went somewhere neither of you planned. A shared curiosity about something most people do not think twice about. A moment where someone said something that matched the way you think rather than just the room you happen to be standing in. That is the shape of your engagement with the world. And your culture has spent a long time telling you it is the wrong shape, that you should want the bigger room, the louder moment, the simpler and more universal connection. It is not the wrong shape. It is yours. The reframe, you were not built for spectating. That is the honest truth of it. You were built for something that requires more of your specific kind of attention, more patience, more depth, more the particular way your brain tracks, meaning rather than scores. And yes, that makes you the loneliest person in some rooms, the one who is present but not quite participating, the one who learns to nod at the right moment, and then sits quietly in the gap between the performance and the actual self. But it also, occasionally, makes you the most interesting person in the room, the person who asked the question nobody else asked, who noticed the thing everybody else walked past, who makes the connection between two things that nobody thought to connect, who sits across from you in a quiet conversation and makes you feel, for the first time in a while, that the thing you are actually thinking about is worth thinking about. That person is you, in the right room, with the right people. When you do not have to perform a signal, you were never built to transmit. You were never missing something. You were never the broken one, the cold one, the person who just has not found the right team yet. You were the one looking somewhere else. And what you find, when you look where your brain actually wants to look, is rarely the kind of thing that fits on a scoreboard. But it fits. It fits in a way that the nod never did. You have always known the difference. The room full of noise, and the moment the noise stopped, and the quiet underneath it, where the thing you were actually looking for was waiting. That is not emptiness. That is the signal. Leave a comment with the one thing you are actually passionate about, the thing your brain runs on when it is not performing someone else's interest. I want to know what that signal actually is for you. And subscribe if you want more. There's a lot more where this came from. Every week.